Welcome to Brain Lady Speaks with Julie Anderson. Julie Brain Lady Anderson is considered to be one of the nation's top experts on the brain-personality connection. She has been inspiring her audiences to fire up their brains and ignite positive changes in their relationships. And now she is here to bring that knowledge to you. The information she shares will help those who hear it to accelerate their success in life and business through the discovery of their natural gifts and maximizing their brain power. When you learn to tap into the potential of your natural gifts and the power of the brain-mind connection, there is no limit to what you can accomplish. Today and every Wednesday on Brain Lady Speaks, you'll explore the latest findings to see how they have practical application in your life. And now, get ready to join Julie Anderson on the Brain Lady Speaks radio show. Take it away, Julie.
Welcome to the Brain Lady Speaks podcast and now video podcast. I am Julie Brain Lady Anderson, and I have a great interview for you guys today. We've had a little bit of hiccups over the last couple of months trying to get my guest on to this show, and he is our first video interview, and I'm really excited to be doing it on this platform. It'll bring higher value to those of you who are watching, if you're watching it on one of the video channels. And of course, if you're listening in on any of those audio, iTunes or any of the podcast stations, then thank you very much for doing so. And if you want to, you can always go back and catch it on YouTube, catch the video on YouTube. So I am going to remind everyone, as I always do, stay on until the end of the program, because it's at the end of the program that I'm going to give you all the good, yummy stuff on how to get in touch with and stay connected with my guest today, because I know that you're going to want to do so. I know I am going to, for sure, because guess what? He's going to be talking about brain stuff, and you know I love that brain stuff and movement. So we're gonna have a great interview. I'm just gonna go ahead and read to you a little bit of his bio so you can get a background on my guest Trent today. So he has been doing this work for more than 2 decades, helping people gain back their mobility. And his story started because he was born, or his journey started, I should say, because he was born with a mild form of cerebral palsy. And he experienced the pain and that stiffness and that discomfort all the time as a child. And he realized that he needed to do something to solve the problem. And so he started to transform his movement capabilities, and he combined that with his love for sports. So as his bio goes, when Trent discovered to repair his own body became the foundation for what would be his life's work. He attended Western Michigan University, where he received a BFA in dance, requiring studies in movement, science, and training. He does now. He'll have to correct me if I pronounce this wrong. Feldenkrais, Leban movement analysis, Bartanif. Fundamentals, kinesiology, and anatomy. Trent pursued a career as a professional dancer, where he performed on stages throughout the country and abroad. So now he's a movement professional. He took all that education, and for more than 20 years, he has taught his transformational the brain, neuro movement methods and tools to thousands of clients and movement professionals across the globe. And he helps individuals. So his mission is to get the methods and tools out to everyone who needs the help. And that is why he started the Fire Up Your Brain program. By the way, that is the name of his website, fireupyourbrain.com. It's fun, it's engaging, it's affordable, and it supports his mission. It is his professional teaching. He spends time problem solving and educating the world through his Ask Trent live programming, building a network of brain speed coaches. I love that. And doing speaking engagements to educate, and podcast interviews, obviously, to educate people on how to enhance their brain performance. Trent McEntire is my guest today. Trent, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. It is, like I said, it's exciting to have you here. And one of the first questions I always like to ask my guests, and for you, I think it's especially important to know this. Give us your backstory. Like, what led you into? I read the technical of it, right? But give us a little personal backstory of where you were at and how that led you into building the business that you are running now with neuromovement.
Yeah, what's amazing is that I actually, you mentioned having cerebral palsy, um, and I didn't know that I was born with cerebral palsy until I was 19. And so that was really like learning that, having that discovery at the moment that it happened became the catalyst for everything. And so I was in college, and I was, halfway through my degree, and having a lot of success in the program and getting a lot of stage time and performing a lot. And we had a very high demand couple of weeks, and my body was just like, you know what, I'm done. I can't do anymore. And I woke up and I could barely walk to the shower. I had so much pain from the knees down that I just like hobbled to the shower. And I thought this is a real problem. And being a student, I didn't have the resources for any kind of therapies or any kind of professional help. And I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to do here. And that kind of coincided with a holiday break. So I was home on break and just kind of complaining to my mom. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I can barely walk in the morning. Like, I have so much pain and inflammation from the knees down. It's so weird. I don't get it. And because at the time I was doing weight training, and I was doing Pilates, and I was dancing. I was doing everything that I should be doing to stay injury free. And I said, I just don't get what's going on. What is happening? And she looked at me and she's like, well, Trent, that's because you were born with cerebral palsy. And I was like, wait, what? First of all, what is that? And second of all, like, what do you mean? And
It
she's
was your
like, yeah,
mom, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And people often ask me, like, are you happy that you found out later? Would you rather have known earlier? And I think finding out when I found out was the right timing for me. So, I've moved beyond holding any grudges on not being told. But she said, don't you remember when you were 3? And I'm like, 3 is hard to remember. But she's like, yeah, the doctor put casts on your legs. And then I remembered having these casts on my legs. I had like this flash memory of having these casts on my legs so that because I had no ankle mobility. And so the doctor put casts on my legs to force my heel to the ground, to stretch the back of my leg out so that I could walk on the soles of my feet, not just on the balls of my feet. And of course, that is exactly what contributed to all the overuse and inflammation in my lower legs, because I had such limitation in the lower leg that I was putting such high demand on something that had very little range of motion. And then it was like, wow. And so then I had an answer. Then I had something to go with. And so then it was like, well, I'm going to problem solve this, because I went to college to get a better life and to be the first in my family history to ever go to college and to get out of my tiny town of 300 people, literally 300 people, and go someplace and do something with my life. And I wasn't gonna let that opportunity slip through my fingers. And so I just started problem solving and developing exercises and using the methods that I had learned so far, and made a lot of mistakes, made it worse, made it better, would know what would help, what wouldn't help. And then I was eventually able, within the course of like a month or so, totally rehab my injury and
Wow.
continue dancing, go on to dance professionally. And that became the catalyst for everything that I do and I've done since, because it was having to problem solve and figure out what works, what doesn't work, what helps, how long does it help. That became the lens that I look through.
Right.
And because back then, while I was doing these movement therapies that are centered around the fact that the brain is plastic and that it can change, we know that now. They didn't have that language back then. It wasn't until well into my career that books started coming out about the brain being plastic, that you could change it and you could build new patterns and it wasn't a fixed object. And it was amazing because these books start coming out and I'm like, based on what I do, I really probably should read these books. This is probably going to be great information for me.
Sure.
And I pick them up and I'm like, well, this is what I'm doing. Like, this is what I've been doing for 15 years. And now there's a book talking about it. I'm like, now I have a vocabulary. Now I have a language. Now I have a resource to help other people understand what it is that I do. And that was an amazing thing, because, I thought I was I felt like I was in a deficit when these books came out. But as it turned out, I'd been working in that space, just not knowing what it was called, not knowing, the science that was already written and researched behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always tell people that's one of the things that got into my brain and why I became a brain geek is once you started understanding the science of why certain things worked, right? And why certain things don't work and the potential that the brain has when you're talking about that neuroplasticity. It's just like, oh my goodness, there's so much that we can accomplish if we literally put our brain to it, right? If we put our mind to it. So thank you for that backstory. It's amazing to hear. I always like hearing that. How did people get to where they are? What motivated them and what moved them? And you have such a story that a lot of other people obviously can relate to, who have the same disorders or the same challenges physically, right? They'll be able to relate to that and then take us into the next step. So you have this backstory, you've got all of this movement that you've been doing, and you're learning the science behind it. So when did you now start your work on the brain, that connection between the brain and the physical activity, or the brain performance, as you call it?
Yeah, so this is like the other prong of my story, and it's for me, I share with people that I failed the first grade because it's such an important part of my story, because failing first grade were centered around my challenges with reading, and those challenges didn't really become a solution in my school until I was in the third grade. And so I failed first grade, retook it, was successful, passed second, and get to third. And my third grade teacher, who I won't name because she was doing her best, she told my mom, she's like, he's really struggling with reading, and it's a problem. And so the solution that I want to do is to give him more reading at home so he gets better at it. And in a vacuum, that sounds like a great idea.
Right.
If the problem was my ability to actually read or comprehend or follow sentences or understand words. But it's like, oh, you struggle with that? Let me give you more of that. But when the issue is really something else. And I didn't discover until I was in my 30s what that issue was. And so my whole life, reading has been hard. Even when I was in college, I would get up at like 6 a.m. and read my books standing up, because for me, what would happen is 1 or 2 sentences in, I'd be reading and I would fall asleep. And I discovered in my 30s that my eyes didn't work well together. They were doing two different things, seeing two different places. And typically what happens when that's the case is that you either have double image, like you see two of something because each eye has its own image, or you fall asleep when you read because your brain is suppressing one of the images from the eyes. Now, that sounds like a lot to understand, but the bottom line is this: you want both of your eyes to see the same thing at the same time. And when they don't, it creates a problem in your brain because it puts extra work and processing on the brain. And so it wasn't the actual ability to read that was the problem. It was that my eyes could not stay focused on the same thing. And so that made the active reading what was challenging. And I happened to be at a conference and made this discovery. But on the way to my conference, I was mentioning to a client of mine, I said, oh, I'm reading this book that I really love. And there's a series of them, and it's really enjoyable. But see, at that point, I didn't share with people that I use audiobooks. So when I say I was reading a book, I was listening to a book because I was too ashamed of the fact that I couldn't read without falling asleep. So, but since I had said I'm reading a book and I need to get the next book for my trip, she was so kind to go out and buy me the book that was next in the series for my trip and say, here, on the plane ride, and you can have this book and enjoy it. I was like, oh, thank you. It's like, now I got to download the audio, listen to the audiobook, and so I can report back, and had this whole thing I had to do.
So when she asks, how was the book? You can have an answer.
Exactly. And I'm like, I feel all this pressure to respond and please the situation, And so I go to the conference, and of course I don't read the book on the way to the conference because I can't read on the plane, let alone, read at all easily, and make it enjoyable. And I get to the conference, and I'm there, with my booth promoting my work. And I happen to meet a vision therapist who did a couple eye exercises with me, and it lit me on fire. I was like, that's the missing piece. The missing piece is I'm doing all of this very high level brain patterning work in the muscles and the joints and the soft tissues, but I haven't brought the eyes on board in a very deliberate, I'm using them, but not in a very deliberate and problem solving perspective. And it was at that point when I did a couple exercises and went back to my booth, and a friend had stopped by, and I missed them, and they wrote me a note. And I read the note, and I was like, I have never read like this. I read so fast. It was so easy. And I'm like, is this what reading is supposed to be like? This easy?
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, I really need to investigate more the connection between how well your eyes perform and how well your brain is performing.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you have eyes that aren't working well together, the implications of that and just how you perform in your everyday activities.
Yeah.
And so that was the piece that really brought the brain online for me to be deliberate about bringing my problem solving techniques I've been doing for years into a whole brain approach. So when I say whole brain approach, I'm talking about, your muscles and your joints. I'm talking about your eyes, and I'm talking about your inner ear. So this three pieces that gives you really good sensory input to the brain.
Right.
It just lit it on fire for me.
I love it. I love it. So what is the program then that you do? So like take us through a typical exercise that you use in your brain. I'm assuming it's the brain performance program, or what
Yeah.
do you actually call it?
Yeah, Fire Up Your Brain is the name of the program. And this is we have three main programs. There's kids, seniors, and athletes. And so since we're video, I'll show you kind of on video what it looks like so you can get an example.
Love it.
So I invented the Brain Speed Ball. And so that's this guy here. And it's just for the people that are listening and not watching, it's a bright orange ball, and it's got black writing on it. It's A through Z and 1 through 12. And so if you and I were playing, Julie, we'd be throwing the ball back and forth. So it starts off as a simple game of catch. And then what we're doing is then asking you to track the ball as it comes into your hands. And then you're going to tell me what you see on the ball. So if I were to throw it to me, I'd catch it, and I see a D. So then I would say D out loud. I'd throw it to you. You see a 3. You'd say 3 out loud. And by playing this game back and forth, you're asking your eyes to track into different places and spaces, and also asking it to go through a processing cycle of sensing what's happening, deciding what to do about it, and then acting on it by saying it out loud. And the combination of that brings your brain online. It regulates you, it creates focus. And so it's a simple game of catch. And ultimately, what it comes down to is just playing the game of catch that is challenging, and it keeps it fun, because fun is like the foundational rule here to keep the brain interested.
Absolutely.
So it's a simple game of catch. And in the programs, we just teach people the different games and how to optimize them and make them successful so that they can get the most out of the program.
I love it. So my first book that I wrote, I don't know how long ago I wrote it. What I wrote, 15 years ago, maybe 20. We're 22 now, something like that. Was on because I homeschooled my kids, for all three of my boys, for 16 years, beginning to end, with each of them. Well, kindergarten through 11. They were all graduated early and they did their own college. But no, long story short, I used a lot. About 6 years into that is when, into my schooling them at home, is when I really got a lot of information and started studying the brain. And I changed. I love it. John Medina in his book, Head First. No. John Medina did Brain Rules. In his book, Brain Rules, he says that if you want to create because my brain's thinking this not just from individuals who have physical challenges like what you started out with,
right,
but kids as a whole. And he says that if you want to create a school system that is directly opposed to how the brain likes to learn, you'll create what we have here in the United States and Western society.
Right.
And I love it, because then I started implementing a lot of these things. And what you're saying about tossing the ball back and forth, in that book I mentioned, you've got a lot of kinesthetic learners. They're about 30% of the population. Now, a lot of tests and a lot of research will tell you that it's not that high. It's not nearly that high. In all of my research, that's what I found, at least 30%, which means they have to have that movement. So one of the things that I suggest is tossing a ball back and forth when you're practicing your spelling words, right? Getting the body in motion, getting your, doing multi-sensory input that's going to help the brain like hold on to that information better. I also mentioned, you said that you have to be standing, or you had to be standing when you were reading, and you'll have to, and I always tell people, why do you have to sit at a desk, right? Your brain goes, just like your arm would go tired sitting in the same position for too long, your brain starts to too. Get up and move, So anyways, I really, really, what you're saying resonates with me, and the things that I have learned over the years in neuroscience and gained. And I love that you're teaching that. And now, tell me, how does this kind of compare to like you used it for your reading,
Yeah.
obviously,
Yeah.
and for your physical, the physical challenges that you had based on your health challenge.
Mhm.
How does it help just the average person, like, someone who maybe doesn't feel that they have those challenges? How can it, from my perspective, it's going to be you're creating new brain wiring. You want new brain, you want new neural connections, anything you can do to do your brain with your brain that. But tell me some of the practical things that just any of my average listeners who says, well, I don't have a health challenge, or I don't have this or that, why would it
Yeah.
benefit them?
Yeah, it's like it's really a new lens to look through. So it's like it's starting. Here's what my request is. I request that everybody consider looking through a new lens when it comes to taking care of your body. That your brain and body are not different. They're not separate. They're connected. And in fact, research has shown that the eyes are a part of your brain, not something else that's attached to your brain. They're actually considered an integral part of the brain. And we look at our body in so many parts and pieces. And we look at exercise, and most people hate exercise and they hate moving their body, and they weren't taught how to move their body well, so they don't enjoy it. And so, yes, anybody can benefit from good sensory input. But I'll tell you, I like to have a goal in mind. I like to have something we can measure. So, then we know we're on track. So I'll just tell you a story of a mom that called me. I've never met her in person. I'd love to, but she lives in Chicago, and she called and she said, I just have to tell you that this ball has changed my whole family's life, and I have to tell you why. And I get goosebumps immediately. I still get them when I tell the story because it's incredible. She's like, my 13-year-old has always struggled with doing her homework. She just can't sit and focus and do her homework. And she's 13, and it's always been an issue. And I got this ball for me from a friend, and I left it on the counter, and she grabbed it and she started playing it and making up games. And I started teaching her games that I was learning. And for the first time in her life, she could sit and do her homework. And it's amazing. But she said, Trent, the thing is that it changed her whole house, because imagine the stress that the whole house is under when you have a teenager that can't do their homework. And then as a parent, you think, well, what's going to come of them? What's their trajectory? Are they going to be able to go to college? Are they going to be able to get a job, or whatever it is that they want to do? And for that to be resolved with a simple game of catch that was fun and that she came up with on her own to start is really profound. And so you don't have to have an injury. You don't have to have, I have quite a story. You don't have to have my story to have it help you. And that's why I made it a fun, simple game of catch that anybody can do.
I love that. I love that, because you're so right. When there's any challenge anywhere in the household, no matter what that is, stress shuts down the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is so important for critical thinking. And if you're losing that, then you're having difficulties just remembering to pay your bills on time, right? There's all of these little things that are affected by the bigger picture of, or the impression or the problems that are created by too much stress in your life. So when you reduce that stress, whatever you can, so that's brilliant. That's brilliant. So everything is kind of centered around the ball then, and movement with the ball.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is make sure that it's a fun game. So many times when it comes to visual deficiencies or vestibular deficiencies and focus, the therapies can be very effective and be very serious and not fun. And kids don't want to do their homework, and they don't want to do the sheet that's the tear off sheet that they took home. And a lot of the clients that I work with, one-on-one, have great instructions from their vision therapist, but that's not fun. They don't want to do it because it's not something they enjoy doing. And so, yeah, it's all centered around a fun game of catch with the ball. And there's so many ways to play. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, you could catch the ball and just call out a number or a letter, but then also we can play a geography game where you catch it and you have a letter and you got to think of a place in the world that starts with that letter. So we start bringing other levels of brain performance into it. We can do math games. So you catch a number, and then as you're catching it, you're adding it, and you're saying the sum, or you're saying the multiplication table out loud that you're getting off of what you've tracked in the ball. So you got that eye tracking. So you get that strength input to your brain, but you also have that decision processing happening at the same time. And for people that can't catch a ball, we can roll it. I have older population that I've worked with, dementia clients that they can go from having such a terrible day and terrible moment to smiling. And if that's all it takes is a fun game to get them to switch into like not having so much grief, it's just beautiful.
Yeah. It is. It's absolutely beautiful. I love that. I love that. So what is brain speed, and why should someone care about making movements or
Yeah.
improvements
Yeah,
in brain?
that's a really great question, because I'll tell you what it's not is how fast can the brain feel like spinning out. We're not talking about like feeling wired and spinning out. We're talking about efficiency. So how fast can a brain process through its sense, decide, act cycle? The faster it can go through that cycle, the more efficient it is, the more information it can take in, the lower the stress, the better the regulation, and whatever task you're doing, whatever movement you're trying to accomplish, whether it's, just driving your car or walking your groceries in, or, whatever it might be, it can be accomplished. Even just critical thinking, you got a decision to make. If you're not
Yeah.
regulated, you're not in your body, and you're not in a place to be able to make a good decision, then it's hard to make those critical thinking decisions.
Yeah.
So,
And oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, go ahead.
Yeah. There's a lot of research that's been done, because you brought up the dementia patients. There's a lot of research that's been done about, exercise and how good it is in staving off or lowering your risk of things like that. And my brain is kind of buzzing going, okay, one of the studies, they did a long-term study in Europe. I think it was over the course of 10 or 20 years. I can't remember the details, that they studied all of these different people and different activities that they would do on a regular basis, and how much it reduced their risk of getting dementia or Alzheimer's or a memory deficient disease and cognitive disorder. And they found that one of the highest percentage reduction was 74%, and that was in people who did couples dancing together, patterned dancing. So it's that movement, it's that getting the body in that movement, and then having to think about the movement, engage your brain and your physical muscles to think about what's the next movement, and to work together with a partner. It becomes so complicated, but the brain loves the complication, because that's what keeps it alive and healthy. So my brain's going, okay, I can see how this program that you have, as you're moving physically, which is excellent for the body, but you're also adding, or you're spelling, or you're doing something additional and engaging additional portions of the brain that's going to be even more healthy for the brain.
Yeah. And, for the older population, we're also talking about balance. And, balance lives in the inner ear. It lives in that vestibular system. And being able to improve and strengthen that system is key to improving balance. So fall prevention is a huge aspect for the seniors program. And, it oftentimes, seniors will often go do their exercise programs, and it's great. And it's in that muscle joint category.
Right.
But when we're talking about whole brain, we got to get into the vision, and we got to get into the vestibular. So we're addressing the balance, because your eyes and inner ear have a very close relationship when it comes to balance. And so we want to tap into that relationship, and tracking with the eyes and having head movements and actually creating strength in those patterns and pathways is crucial.
I love it. I love it. I love your work. So let's talk about how people can stay connected with you. What are some of the, what's the best way to get in contact? We're going to have, for those of you who are listening, we will, as always, have on the show page his website, all of this information that he's going to next share with us. So if you're not, and we'll put it in the YouTube, we'll put it down in the comment section. So you'll have all of that, but go ahead for anybody who's listening and wants to jot it down. How do they stay in touch with Trent?
Yeah, I would suggest you go to fireupyourbrain.com and you go to the Ask Trent page. And this is just a free program that I do that allows people to ask questions. And what I do is I record videos and publish them and answering the question. And you can watch previous questions that I've answered, and you can be notified when there's new video available for you to watch. And that's for people who have the program and people that are looking at the program to see, does this make sense for me? And you can see the different scenarios and different problems that I'm talking about and how to solve them with the game. And And that gives people a chance to say, well, is this okay? I have a unique situation, and is this right for me? And how does it help somebody with thus and such? And you can ask those questions and get an answer from me.
I love it. I love it. And do you have, let me look on, you have a Facebook page as well, right?
Yeah. So Fire Up Your Brain at Fire Up Your Brain on Facebook. And a lot of times I publish the videos that I do for Ask Trent on that page, and you'll have people commenting, and you can ask follow-up questions underneath the video and feel like you have support. Because ultimately, when it comes to this work, you can often feel by yourself and alone, especially if you're dealing with a stressful situation, whether it's yours or it's your kids or it's your parents that are having, falling issues, or they're at risk of falling, or their memory care, something like that. You can feel alone and feel, pretty isolated. So this is a way to provide people some support, and you don't feel like you're alone.
I love it. So such great information. What is your best piece of advice that you want to give the listeners today that they can walk away with? Obviously, stay connected with Trent. Get the ball. I want to get the ball. I want to hear more about this. Incorporate it into my brain training work and my certification program that I have, if I can somehow, So my brain's buzzing on the possibilities. But right now, somebody's listening to this interview, watching this interview, what can they do when they walk away that's going to improve their brain power?
Yeah, it starts with considering that this is easy. This is not difficult, and it can be a fun game. And when we talk about the brain, we often can overwhelm people, because those that don't have any understanding, or they're not read up on, or don't have a context, they don't have a there to go, what do you mean brain processing? What do you mean brain speed? It's okay. You don't have to know all of the details of that to know that strengthening your senses, strengthening your eyes, your inner ear, has a profound effect on everything that you do. And it really can be that easy, even if you don't know the science behind it all. And so I just want people to start considering having a lens, because it starts with having a lens to look through to go, yeah, this is something that's really valuable for me. And there's a ton of research. If you want to do the research, you can find a ton of great research on the topic written by multiple people. But just considering it is the first start. Just like the first time you considered, yeah, I think I'm going to start exercising. I think I'm going to start learning how to cook, or I'm going to, organize my laundry a certain way. You just consider it first, because that sets the stage to then make it possible for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you can do it in a fun way, because the brain loves fun.
Yeah.
The brain loves fun. Stay so healthy when it's that way. Well, Trent, thank you so very much. Again, I encourage everyone watching or listening to stay in touch with him. Go check out his website. Look at what he has, watch some of those videos that he has to answer some of your questions, and stay connected, because I think he's, from my brain's point of view, obviously he's going to continue his researching the researchers and finding out more information and improving his programs. So stay connected. And Trent, thank you so much for being a guest on the Brain Lady Speaks show today. I really appreciate it, and I'm honored that you took your time to spend with us.
My pleasure, Julie. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. For those of you who want to stay in touch with the Brain Lady, you can find me at Brain Lady on Twitter, Brain Lady Julie on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and you can follow me on Facebook. You can find me there. All of those links are in the show page or down in the comments here on YouTube. And if you found this interview interesting, informative, share it. Give us that thumbs up. Give us that. Share it to your network, because obviously there are people out there who need to hear this information. And if you can share it out there for us, it will fall on the right ears. All right. Thank you, everyone, for spending this time with us. And again, thank you, Trent, for being here.